Hola, hola! My name is Zulean Diaz, and welcome to Una Preguntita. As a Texas Rican, my life has been anything but traditional. I went from studying engineering to farming in Hawaii to building a career in nonprofits before diving into entrepreneurship. Every twist and turn taught me something new. But let's be real, life doesn't come with a manual. In Una Preguntita, we always begin con una pregunta, a question. So dime, have you ever felt like you're thriving in one area of your life while Googling how to be a functioning adult for the rest of it at 2 a.m.? Yeah, been there too. Every week, you and I are diving into the stuff nobody really teaches us. How to actually understand ourselves, build connections that matter, and handle those awkward conversations that keep us up at night. Whether you're figuring out workplace dynamics or trying to level up your emotional intelligence game, we're getting into it. I'm bringing you big questions, tools, and strategies for you to build the life and career you want. No filtered perfection, just honest conversations and practical ways to grow into your unapologetic self. Grab tu cafecito, get comfy, and let's figure this out together. Esto es Una Preguntita, where curiosity and understanding leads to action. Vamos! Okay, amiguis. This week's preguntita is, how do you know when you're taking on too much? Like, how do you actually recognize the signs before you're in too deep? I have a feeling you might be a little like me. You love to think you can handle it all until you can't. Maybe you're juggling work, a side hustle, family, a social life, todo. Pero at what point does pushing through turn into pushing yourself too far? Today, you and I are going to talk about it. We're going to talk about overwhelm and, more importantly, what do you do about it? Antes que empecemos, before we begin, I want to ask you, have you ever noticed how babies learn sign language before they can talk? Like, we teach them the sign for more or all done before they have the words for them. A mentor of mine, Noelani Lee, hit me with this fact when I was at a really overwhelmed point in my life. I was starting up Ziconecta, trying to handle a full-time job, and my family had just realized and was beginning to accept that abuela, my grandma, was developing dementia. My brain was juggling a million things, but I kept telling myself, I can handle it. Keep going. Meanwhile, my body, she was giving out warning signs left and right. In a one-on-one with her, Noah Lenny, she left me with this gem, and she said, we teach babies sign language because we can't read their minds, but they still have needs. And guess what? Nobody can read your mind, Zulean, but you still have needs. That hit me hard because the more I kept everything bottled up without asking for help, the bigger and heavier it all felt. And that's the thing. When we ignore our limits, it makes everything feel impossible. A friend of mine who's also a leadership coach, Ervin Antonio Hidalgo, once said in one of his masterminds, a big problem was once an unresolved small problem to begin with. I'm going to say that again. A big problem was once an unresolved small problem to begin with. He said this in the context of like leadership and work, but it can really be translated into different situations. Mira, let's break this down. Overachievers, aka you and me, run into two problems when we start feeling overwhelmed. Number one, we're balancing too much. And number two, it's hard to break down what is priority and what is not. When you're at a heightened state, it feels like everything is critical. I still remember when this happened to me. I was living in North Carolina at the time, and just a few months before Hurricane Maria swept through Puerto Rico, And that same category 4 hurricane level was predicted to hit North Carolina. And so, for some background, in case you don't know about Hurricane Maria, it was a category 4 hurricane that wrecked the island, killing over 4,000 people and left many parts of the island without electricity for over a year. So, with this information, my family and I were really worried about the category 4 hurricane coming through North Carolina. I was trying to get everything ready to evacuate, and my stress levels were obviously high, and I couldn't think straight. I thought that going to my hot yoga class was right up there with packing. Obviously, in retrospect, it is not. It was not. But my heightened state, I couldn't think straight. So, in case you are in a heightened state where everything seems to be a priority when your logical brain on a regular day knows it's not, here's what you can do. I'm going to break down 3 different thoughts. Número uno, identify your glass balls versus your plastic balls. I can't take credit for this analogy since I learned it on LinkedIn, but it was so good I had to share it with you. Okay, so it goes like this. Imagine you're juggling a bunch of balls. Some of those are plastic, so if you drop them, it's no big deal. You can just pick them back up later, right? But others are glass balls. If you drop them, they shatter and you can't put them back together. Here's the key. When you're drowning in responsibility, you have to know which is which. I personally had to put this into practice recently. These last few weeks, I was in Houston helping my aunts run a store for the Texas Department of Ag, a contract that they got. And I thought I could juggle it all. Podcast, newsletter, client work, you name it. But your girl was struggling. My focus was diluted. Like Rory Vaden says, diluted focus equals diluted results. My focus was diluted and I couldn't think straight. So I had to ask myself, what are my glass balls? What are my plastic balls? What are the things that I can drop and it'll be okay when I pick them back up later? And what can I not drop? So work commitments, glass. Family obligations, glass. Posting on socials, plastic. So I let my social media go a little bit quieter than I like to have it. And I knew that I could do that because it was a plastic ball. I could pick it back up later. Y esa es la clave, that's the key. Realizing you don't have to do it all at once. Ask yourself, what is actually critical and what is just noise? Okay, so that was number 1. Identify your glass balls versus your plastic balls. Now, punto número 2, number 2, break down the workload to see it in a new light. Overwhelm isn't always about too much work. Sometimes it's about how you think about it. When you're spinning in the I have so much work to do mode, your brain turns everything into one massive tangled up problem. But zoom out. What I want you to do is I want you to write it all out. Grab a piece of paper or an Excel sheet. Yes, my engineers, you and I, we love our Excel sheets. And split up your work into columns. I like to call each of these columns buckets. If your role or job title is outreach coordinator, think of your buckets or column titles, as however you want to call it, as, let's say, store operations, social media, grant writing, whatever applies to your load, right? Create those titles, those columns. List every task, even the small stuff like answering DMs, under each of those buckets so you start beginning to create a long column list. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to find patterns. Look at your work list. What tasks can be grouped together, can be delegated, or can be cut? Did you hear those 3 points? Grouped, delegated, cut. If you are bouncing between screens of your email and then social media and then email and social media and back and forth, yes, your adrenaline is going to be pumping and rushing, but you're not working efficiently. What you have to do is you have to combine those tasks into focused blocks. You only pay attention to your email once a day or twice a day, right? You're not constantly going back into it. The goal is to work smarter, not harder. Unfortunately, when everything feels like a priority, nothing actually is. Did you hear that? When everything feels like a priority, nothing actually is. Okay, so we went over número uno, identify your glass balls versus your plastic balls. Y número dos, break down the workload to see it in a new light. Number 3 is be kind to yourself. Seriously. I'm learning that self-discipline is great, but self-compassion is what keeps us going. Old me would have beat herself up for not doing everything during those weeks that I was in Houston. But now I'm learning to talk to myself the way I'd talk to a friend. Instead of talking to myself and saying, you should be able to handle XYZ like everybody else does, I now ask, how can I support myself to get to X spot? Instead of, why can't I just keep up? I say now, I'm doing the best with what I have right now. The kinder you are to yourself, the quicker you actually get to problem solving and the more sustainable your success becomes. So, amigui, aquí está el resumen. Here's a summary. Not all tasks are equal. Figure out your glass balls versus your plastic balls. Number 2, break down the workload to see it in a new light. Group, delegate, cut. Número 3, be kind to yourself. Treat yourself like a friend. Discipline is good, but compassion is better. Overwhelm, amigui, is not a badge of honor. It's a sign. And learning how to listen to it, that's how you actually get ahead. So tell me, what are your glass balls versus your plastic balls? And how are you leading with compassion this week?
Zulean. ¿Qué aprendiste esta semana, Zulean?
Woohoo! I finally got you on the pod, Angelo. Bueno, that was a great question, Angie. Thanks for asking. Pues mira, this week I've had this thought circulating that the faster you try things, the faster you learn, and the closer you actually get to perfect. I don't know about you, but I'm realizing that I thought perfectionism came from tweaking and fixing something forever until it was quote unquote just right. But in reality, that actually slows us down from ever getting close to perfect. Maybe you keep rewriting that email or project proposal one more time instead of just sending it. Maybe you've been sitting on a creative idea but won't launch it until you have the perfect plan. And how about you wanting to switch careers but feel like you need to take just one more course before you're actually ready? O sea, we think we're being smart by perfecting things first, but in reality, we're just delaying our own success. The people who actually master their craft aren't the ones who overthink every detail. They're the ones who put things out, learn fast, and keep improving. Recently, I had to check myself. With this podcast, people have been curious and they've been asking about my format and if I'm inviting others on. And my response on repeat has been, since I'm figuring this whole podcasting thing out and I'm new, I want to get all the technical parts hashed out first before having anybody else on. But the more I would say that answer, the more I realized, I'm trying to reach this idea of perfect before I even start. Pero good only comes from doing it messy, doing it imperfect, and really figuring it out as you go. the more I just record, the faster I'll learn and the better this podcast will get. So I'm diving in. I don't have everything figured out, and that's exactly why I need to start. Now, I'm turning the tables on you, amigui. Where are you holding yourself back, waiting to reach this level of perfect instead of just doing? That's the show, amigui. Si te gustó, if you liked it, make sure to share it, rate it, and write a review. ¿Qué aprendiste? What did you take away from today? Como siempre, I'm your amiga Zulean, and I'm sending you off today con un huge abrazo, amigui. Nos vemos en la próxima.